I'm learning a new game, and what I'm learning is a solo RPG called Little Town, which is based on the cult 1980s television show Twin Peaks. So it's a mystery adventure game set in a remote little town, hence Little Town. Now, how I've got to playing this, or why I'm playing this, is I kind of want to get back into solo RPGing, or get into solo RPGing. But I made a schoolboy error, and I rushed into my local store and got excited about a particular game I saw. I thought it was right up my street, bought it, got it home, started looking into it. Oh, it looked fantastic. But then I started realizing I've no background whatsoever in playing solo RPGs, and that became particularly obvious when I started trying to learn the mechanism of this game, which was a little bit more complicated. I wouldn't say it was a beginner's game, so I kind of got stumped there, but still wanted to do this. So I decided to take a step back, go back to a more simpler solo RPG game, and learn from there and work up to the more complex game that I'd bought. Okay, so that's you've caught up with where I am now. Now, the reason I chose Little Town was I didn't want to start as simplistic or as simple as those kind of fighting fantasy type books. You know, the paperback books that have an adventure. I think they call it a choose your own adventure type book, where you start reading the story and then you're given optional choices, like if your character wants to do this, then turn to page 33, item B, and that'll give you the instructions for what your character does in that particular situation. Or alternatively, if your character wants to do this instead, then turn to a different page and look up a different set of instructions, and that way you work through your adventure until the conclusion. Now, they're great, they're compact, really simple. You can't go wrong with them. You know, there's very few instructions, but they're kind of limited in the way, particularly in replayability. Once you've worked through the book, yeah, you can go back through it again and maybe choose different options, but yeah, you've really done that, you know, and you usually what you do is go out and buy another book. What I wanted is something that was a framework that I could reutilize to build different stories and mysteries. And this is where Little Town comes in, because what Little Town is, now you buy this as PDFs, you download it and you print it out, and I've put it together in this kind of little folder here to make a manual. And what it is full of tables and tables and tables, giving you all sorts of different instructions, which, and here's the important bit, you can randomly roll up. Oh, heck. Good roll. Now, I don't do rolls like that when I actually get into the game, and you'll see this in a minute. Typical, honestly. So you can see tables like this. This is for developing the background to your little town. So it gives you the town name. So you roll a D66, which is two D6s like this, one designating tens, one single unit, so that would be 13. So, you know, 1, 3, and the first part of your name for your little town would be golden, and then you roll in the second or third part, and you get the idea. And this is basically how it works. So, for example, here you can roll up the town's economics by rolling two D6s. That's 7, which would be tourism. So your little town, the main industry for this town would be tourism, and so on and so forth. And you work through this manual like this, building up your background for your particular story, and you start filling it in on these sheets, which you print out. The investigation sheet, which is the overall or overarching background details for your adventure, and then a scene sheet. Now this is great, because this ties into the fact that this is based on a TV show, and what the scene sheet is this is like scenes in episodes of Twin Peaks. So you're kind of like the director, and you're directing this little story, and you're building up these particular scenes. And again, what you do is roll up on all these particular individual items until you've made up a particular scene, and I'll show you how that works in a minute. So you start off with these blank sheets, and then you start filling them out. And I'm going to do a Blue Peter here because here's some that I made earlier. So here's my investigating sheet, the sheet that I'm working on at the moment. And here's my scene sheet, which I've just completed. So I've just completed my first scene. I'm really pleased with myself. I'm really pleased with how this is going, because I've kind of, I've already had a prior run through for this. But what I found was that I was putting a little bit too much work into it. I'll still pursue that adventure, but I did like loads of background research for it, building up this intense and heavy backstory for it. But so I stopped myself. Again, I was getting too far ahead of myself, I think, because I'd yet to really learn this mechanism and how it works, and be sure that I was confident in how to use this book before I started an adventure. So again, this is my second start. I've named it test number 1, but it's in fact my second go at this. And this time I decided, no, I'm literally going to, and excuse the pun, roll with it. I'm just really literally going to roll up what it tells me to roll up, and then start developing my story from there. Not sort of roll up a couple of items and think, oh, I know what I'm going to do, and I make this convoluted background story for this. I literally wrote pages of background for the first attempt at this. It was ridiculous. In fact, I got lost, and this is one of my problems. I go off on tangents very, very easy. And if you're like me and you like developing stories, it's so easy to go off a tangent. And I was writing a full-on story, with the research I was doing. So no, I've decided, no, keep it simple. We'll try it as simple as possible this time, just so we can learn the mechanism. So here we go. We'll work through this. So as I say, you start with the first sheet, which is the investigation sheet, and this is all your main background. And where you start is rolling up your location. And the table I worked on and rolled up gave me a secluded valley in a mountain range. Okay. Not adding to it, not even, I had to literally turn my mind off before my mind started jumping in. This sounds like, and being a film buff, I immediately started thinking of things like this. So no, stop there, Steve. Let's move on. So next, I rolled up the name of the town and the background economics. So this worked out really well in this. I wasn't sure how well this would work out. Rolling random tables to make up names, to me, seems a bit, hit and miss. But honestly, I swear up, I have not made this up. This is how it worked out. I rolled up, my first roll was a 3 and a 1, which gave me bear. My second roll was, where is it? Oh, come on. I've lost it now. I can't find. Here we go. A 6 and a 1, which gave me cave, bear cave. What were the chances of that? That was great. I was really enjoying myself at this point. I thought I was a bit. I didn't think it would work, but it actually did. So I rolled up a really good name for my town, Bear Cave, and that does start getting your mind working into how you can flesh out this background. I've got a town called Bear Cave. It's in a secluded valley in a mountain range. Oh, I was starting to get some ideas here. So I rolled up the economics of this particular town, and that turned out to be, I got a 4, which was dairy farming. Now, I have to admit at this point, I know very little about the United States, other than what I see on television and the Twin Peaks show and other shows. I'm British, so I was starting to get a bit worried here. I've got a valley in a mountain range called Bear Cave, and its economics are based around dairy farming. What the heck do I know about the United States that fits in to that kind of description? So I must admit, at this point, I did open up Google, and I did a very, very light bit of research. It wasn't heavy. I just did some, basically searched on, what kind of locations in the United States do dairy farming that are in kind of like this kind of geographic location. And I came up with one of the items was Pennsylvania. That was good enough for me. And that's as far as my research went at this point. So I've got the name of my town. I've got a little bit of background knowledge about it. Not a lot. This is literally it so far. So we'll move on to the next element, which was I looked up my investigator. Who was my principal character going to be in my little story? And again, there was a table that gives you what kind of roles that your investigator could undertake. It's in here somewhere. I have to label a lot of these because I can see this is one thing that will happen, that I start looking for tables, and it is quite a thick book. So I've already started this. You can see that because I'm having to flick back and forth the different tables, I'm already having to start to label them, and I haven't labeled a lot of the early stuff because it kind of like works from front to back. You work through this background through this book like this. But what I did was I rolled up a student. There was all sorts of different jobs that your main character could do. For example, policemen and things like that. What I didn't want to happen, because this is based on Twin Peaks, what would have been a bit too on the nose would have been if I'd rolled up an FBI agent. That would have kind of spoilt it for me. So if I had rolled that up, I would have re-rolled until I got something that was different. But as it was, I got a student as my main investigator. That's still kind of linked to Twin Peaks because, of course, some of the main characters in Twin Peaks were the high school students, like Audrey Horne and Donna. They were high school students. But I rolled with that. He's going to be a student, and then I rolled up his name using the table for developing names, and I got Darren Reynolds. That sounded pretty okay to me. His archetype, like I say, was a college student, but again, that was a bit too on the nose for me. Funnily enough, I've just rewatched Twin Peaks, and that was a bit too on the nose. So I decided he was a bit older, and he was a university student. And this is where, taking some of this information I gathered already, little ideas are starting to bubble up in my mind. He was a university student. Okay. Then you work through things like every character, like in Twin Peaks, has a secret of some sort. So you have to roll up a secret. You can have numerous secrets. I rolled a 1, and that secret was betrayal. Quite what that meant at this stage, I don't know. But again, I'll use this phrase quite a lot. I rolled with it. I just had some faith that this would lead somewhere. So it was betrayal. Whether he was betrayed or he betrayed someone, as yet, I'm not quite sure. But hopefully, as the story progresses, we'll find out. But that's going to be important at some point. It's interesting, the case, and again, I rolled up, and this is just quoting directly from the table item that I rolled up. The responsible will become more powerful. Again, well, what does that mean? But I stopped myself, didn't think too much into it, and continued to roll. And this is where this game is great, I think, because next, or I can't remember if it was next or before this, but you roll the town backstory. And what I rolled was, and I quote again, a corrupt sheriff once ruled the town with an iron fist, abusing power for personal gain. Now, once you put those two items together, the responsible will become more powerful. And this town backstory, a corrupt sheriff abuses his power for personal gain. Your mind starts ticking over immediately, and you can see how this can develop out. So what I put together some of these items, and I clarified this: the responsible will become more powerful, which is, it's kind of like a bit loose. So what I wrote was, Darren, the student, has a strong sense of justice and perhaps feels that the town's current problems stem from the sheriff's actions. Just that. and I can see how that could develop later. Okay, but again, stop myself there before I got too carried away. So you roll up other things, pretty typical for character generation. You roll up attributes. It's quite hard, I found this, because you've only got 4 attributes and they're set. It isn't something you roll. You've got these set values, a +2, a +1, a 0, and a -1. And you've got to distribute those into your character to develop some sort of range of attributes that describe this particular character. So my placement, bearing in mind he's a young university student, was to err on the side of agility and strength. He's a young, strong male. And unfortunately, this then means that you're giving him a charisma presence, which is kind of equivalent to charisma of 0. Unfortunately, I thought, oh God, this is hard. And mind, which is his intelligence and his ability to investigate, of -1. So what that will mean is when I come to rolling items that demand that my character be able to use his intelligence to solve issues, he will already be down -1 on whatever roll I give him. Now you can see that this is going to be really tricky. I'm going to have to really rely on this. Now I could have sort of just given him a little bit of better spread, I think, but it's really hard when you're given these set values. I mean, they're designed that your character has flaws. Basically, this is what it is. However good you make your character in one area of 2 attributes, he's going to suffer in another 2 areas. So it's kind of a balancing thing, I think. But again, I decided, no, let's just roll with it. You're going to get fed up with me saying that. So things like luck, rolled that up, got 9, which I think's decent. Then you've got instability and wounds. Instability, a lot of role-playing games like this have your mental stability, particularly if you play weird games like Lovecraftian games and that. Your mental health is tied closely to how the game develops. And in this particular case, your instability is linked to how many secrets your character has. As I said, every character in this game has a secret, and Darren's secret was his betrayal. But you only had 1 secret, so that only gives you 1 instability. If you fill this up with instabilities, and these may come about as you play the game, the same with wounds. The more you build up, the weaker your character gets, to the point where if you get three wounds or fill up your instability up here, it's kind of game over for your character. There you go. Your character has 4 items, and as a student, he gets a backpack, a notebook, a pen, and this is interesting, and this is quoted from the manual, a Walkman. Now, the reason this is interesting is that immediately, to me, situates this story in a particular time, a Walkman. So that's going to be the 1980s, at most early 90s. So that's kind of interesting, and that does have ramifications on the way you develop your story, because if you're thinking about things, social issues and technology, for example, you're set in the 1980s, so you've got to think a little bit about that, and you will have to, well, not do a lot of research for this time period, but just be cognizant that you are stuck in the 1980s. So don't start thinking that your character is going to be able to pick up his smartphone and Google some information. You can't do that. You'd have to literally go to a library or some such thing to find information out, or look up a map, this sort of thing. So that was quite important. That's already placed it in the 1980s, which is great because I love the 1980s, and the 1980s is really popular if you're into that. What was that TV series that's just been in, Stranger Things or whatever it's called? And everybody was in it in the 1980s for a while. I'm told that's now over with. People are out of that, but I still love the 1980s. Okay, so we can develop some things from there. We've set up, really I've rolled the town backstory, and that is a corrupt sheriff once ruled the town with an iron fist. We've gone over that, but that to me already gives you your central protagonist in this. This is the baddie. This is the baddie. So that gives you somewhere to go. So you've got the investigator, Darren, and you've got the bad guy who's going to be at the centre of this mystery, probably, right off. I haven't rolled his name yet, but we'll come to that. Because I doubt very much you're going to meet this bad guy straight off the bat in this investigation. There's going to have to be some scene setting, which we'll come to next. So there you go. That's all your background there. The only thing I haven't mentioned is the time limit for the game. The time limit by default is usually 8. You can reset depending on how easy or hard you want the game, but it ticks up or ticks down. It gets harder if it ticks up with a limit of 12, and it ticks down and gets easier to get to the crux of the mystery if you get down to 6. And these can go back and forth depending on what happens in the story. Okay, I'm told that something I've read is that even if you get to 12, that doesn't mean that's it, story over, in much the way that wounds or instability maxing out ends the game. It just means that the game will get a lot more complicated, but I haven't worked out how that works yet. I haven't got to that part, so I can't tell you where that would go from there. I just know that it's bad if you start ticking up towards 12. Okay, that's the investigation sheet. And so last bit now, we'll go to the scene sheet. Now, as I say, this puts you in the role of almost like a television or film director. For example, in Twin Peaks, you'd be the David Lynch, okay? And you've got to make up your mystery built on scenes, which is quite good. I love this mechanism. This is great. 6 of these scenes make up a game day. You can see I've marked up a little thing here. 6 little blocks. That's a day, and at the day you review how your investigation's getting on. So we are at one of these stages in the scene, and how I'll just explain to you how I've actually worked out where I am in the day. Because first thing I did was I had to roll up the location for this first scene. So I did my roll, and I looked up the table, and what I got was an antique tram depot. And I thought about this for a minute, particularly as we just talked about the period that we're working in. And antique tram depot, that didn't really fit. And this is important, and the reason I'm labouring this is the way I look at this. These things that you roll up are more guidelines and not set in the stone instructions. So what I did was I took that tram depot, put it in the context of the 1980s, and thought, no, little isolated town in Pennsylvania, Dan's coming back to this, which we'll talk about in a moment. How would he get there? He'd get there by bus. So it's a bus depot. So there's my first location, or first slot in my scene sheet. Location is the bus depot. Then you do some scene setting elements, things like what time of day, and this comes to this thing here. There's 6 blocks that make up your day, or 6 scenes that make up your day. I think it suggests that the first couple are like morning, second couple are like afternoon, number 5 could be early evening, and then you have one night scene. Okay. And I looked at this. So Dan is arriving at the bus station. He's obviously travelled quite far. So it's going to be at least late afternoon, but probably early evening when he arrives. So I've decided to start in early evening. So I've already lost these 4 parts of the day to make up my game day. This first scene will be number 5, scene 5 in this first day. So I'm nearly at the end of the day already. I'm only going to have 2 scenes in this day: early evening, this scene, and a night scene, which I've got an idea for what I'm going to do next, which I'll talk about in a minute. Okay, so we've done that. A time limit is set at 8. We're at starting the game. It's evening. The weather. I rolled that up, decided to go with this mechanism rather than making it up myself, and I got a very misty day, very misty weather. I'm not sure how that works in with Pennsylvania, what their seasons are like, but no, I was going to go for it with it, mainly because that was very mysterious. Mists and fogs are always very mysterious, and they never bode well. So I thought, no, I'll go with that. It's very misty, and sight. Well, much of the town is covered by fog. I had this idea that Dan's coming back to Bear Cave after being away at university for at least a couple of years, and he hasn't been. This is the first time he's come back to the town, so he's feeling a little, not uneasy, but a little nervous about coming back in this town already. And he comes back to this town and it's veiled, it's shrouded in this mist, which gives everything an eerie look. Everything doesn't look quite how he remembers it. And I like this kind of sense that was building up just through these small instructions or descriptions here. The sound in the area. Well, that was a bit. I'm only saying scene setting here. This first scene's going to be very kind of like brief in a way and not so intense, particularly as he's at the depot. He's undoubtedly going to be moving on from there very quickly, so I didn't want to get into too much detail. But I had this idea for the sound that if you've ever been in a thick mist, sounds are awful muted, and this adds to the eerie nature of the kind of scene. So yeah, I like that idea. The fog creates an eerie silence. Smells. Well, again, unless he's going, and he does actually, as you see here, he'll go into the cafe to have coffee before he moves on. So I guess I could have said things like the smells of fresh coffee, things like that. But what I decided to go with to further invoke this mysterious sense was a strange lack of odours. This blanket of mist that covers the town not only dulls down sensory items like sight and sound, but also somehow mysteriously makes everything not smell. He's not getting the kind of familiar smells and sights and sounds that he knew of this town that he grew up in. Sorry about the phone. Finally, it comes to taste. Much the same thing. To add to the mystery of this, the food that he tastes in this cafe, he has coffee and a sandwich, and it's very bland. This whole sense that he's getting, or feeling that he's getting from the town, is having a very weird, really weird act on all his senses. It's making him feel uneasy, unsettled. So I decided to go with this. Okay, so moving on, we now develop our first NPCs, which again, we roll up from the book. We can get names and types of people from the book. But I decided that obviously, who's going to meet him at the bus station? Well, he's been called back to solve this mystery of his missing sister. At first, I was going to go for, as you can see here, a girlfriend. And what I actually did here, and this is something I should bring up now, I'm keeping a note or a log of the ideas that I'm getting from all this. And one of the things, there wasn't tables in this book for rolling up genders or relationships. So I just quickly made my own little tables for there. If it's male or female, if you roll these items in, and what the relationship was if you rolled up this. And I kind of rolled up girlfriend first of all, but I had to think about it and thought, well, no, obviously it's a family emergency. Who's going to meet him at the depot? It's more than likely a family member maybe a parent rather than his girlfriend. I think she'll come into the story later. Okay, we'll leave it there. And I rolled up names. I decided it was his father that was going to meet him at the station. And his father is called Jerry. I rolled that up. So I put all this together here. Dan has returned to his hometown on hearing of his sister's kidnapping. He is at the bus station and has been met by his father. And I then draw my first scene event. These can be optional, but I decided I wanted to try this out by drawing or rolling on these scene events. I rolled, and my instructions were to draw an anomalies card, and that's where these, you'll be probably been wondering what these playing cards doing here. There's two types of cards you have in the game. What is the mechanisms? There's the instructional cards, the move cards, and some special cards here that give you instructions on how to develop the case. And you have a choice of choosing these as you're going through your investigation. But there's also these randomizers. You split the deck of cards into these 4 suits, and these 4 suits mean different things, which I will just show you if I can find them. And this is one thing, if I haven't pointed it out already, I should point it out to you. There are a lot of tables, and it's quite a thick book. So what I've had to start doing already is earmarking the particular tables that I know I'm going to use a lot of. Here we go. Here's the cards. And this is how the cards work. The diamonds represent single events. So single events that you can roll up with your dice from there. Let's see. Hearts are clues, quite important. Spades are dangers. So these are bad ones to get, I guess. But of course, we'll develop the story. Now, I've got to develop an anomaly that will happen in this first scene. And so what you do is you shuffle your cards like this, your suit of cards, and then draw a card, you know. And once you draw your card, that's a 10, so you would go 10. You're approached by a person whose testimony denies everything you know so far. Quite interesting. What I drew was, can I find it? An ace of spades. So obviously I hadn't shuffled the damn deck that well, but I went with it. So I rolled that, I drew that, sorry, and that give me anomalies. Here we go. I'll just read this out to you. You find a picture hanging on the wall. So Darren is in the waiting room of the bus depot waiting for his father to pick him up. You find a picture hanging on the wall. As you look at it, you notice that it depicts the exact room you're in, including your image looking at the picture itself. Spooky. You look around to see the details, and when you return your attention to the picture, it shows another scene. Okay, fairly common horror film cliche there, but a nice start, and nice to get an anomaly straight off the bat with my investigation there. So I've drawn my anomalies card. I've got the picture shows your scene, kind of like an infinity mirror, where he's looking in the picture, sees himself looking into a picture, seeing himself looking at a picture, that sort of thing. At this point, I reckon that his father has come into the waiting room. He looks around to see his father, looks back at the picture, and it's either a normal version of the picture or a completely different picture. But it's normal now. So he's had that strange first clue that there's something spooky or weird going on in this town. The first kind of like, I wouldn't quite call it a supernatural event, but definitely weird. Okay. Darren is met by his father, and they decide to have a coffee in the station cafe. Now, the reason I I suggested this is because it's my first chance to have a go at questioning someone. I reckon that Darren gets here and the first thing he wants to do is question his father about, well, what's going on? What's happened to my sister? This sort of thing. So I thought the best way to facilitate that was they've met at the waiting room of the bus station and they've decided they're going for a coffee. So they sit down and have a coffee and Darren starts questioning Jerry. Now, one of the things you can do is when you get an NPC, you can roll up their attitude towards you from kind of friendly to abrasive to downright sort of they don't like you at all kind of situation. Now, normally, as a family member, you would think that would be a friendly situation. This is a reunion of a family. But again here, I want to make this a mystery. So what I decided was, wouldn't it be strange if Darren's father met him and wasn't friendly to him at all? In fact, was, quite, as I say, abrasive with him. Short, that's what I mean. Cool, very cold towards him. Now, I kind of, in my head, develop a little bit of a backstory to that, to give the reason for this, that Darren has gone off to university out of town, and he's done this against his parents' wishes. Maybe his father wanted him to stay in town to continue the family business or something. I haven't quite got into that yet, but we'll get there. So they've parted on with bad feelings. There's been some sort of family dispute about this. Darren's stormed off to go to university, possibly even out of state, which his family has not been keen on, and they've kind of estranged from each other because of this. He's kept contact with it. I should imagine he's kept contact with some family members, like his sister and his mother, but obviously there's a beef there between him and his father. His father is really not pleased that he's gone off to university. What does he need to go to university for? He could continue the family business or whatever here. So this is how Darren in his head feels that why this is happening. Why is my father cold towards me? This is why, because it's a bit of an uncomfortable situation, because this is the first time they've met in possibly a year or 2 years, and there's still that thing where they've had this argument. So I roll up this, and I decided to use one of my move cards just to try them out, basically, because, as I say, this is a scene setter, so there's not much going on in the first scene, but I decided to interrogate. I don't know if you see this card here. Interrogate Jerry. And really what I mean by that, it's not really an interrogation. He's questioning very closely Jerry about what's gone on with his sister. How's this happened? Is there any news about it? This sort of thing. So I'm using the interrogation card here to find this. Now, here's what I if I go back, and I think I mentioned earlier about rolling. I got some really bad rolls with this. I had a horrendous roll. I think I got 3 for this, which is really bad, because you've got to adjust it anyway by taking into consideration here, and I've made a note in here. This will show you how my notes work, and it's good that you keep these notes so you can refer back to what happened. I rolled a 3. Jeez. And you mix that with your charisma, which is 0 anyway for Darren. It's rubbish. It's a rubbishful roll. But on top of that, because I rolled so low, you've got to adjust this. So you roll 2d6s plus his presence minus or plus his NPC attitude. Now, if that had been a plus attitude, maybe okay. But as you know, Darren's presence is 0. No, it's NPC attitude. Oh, actually, this is quite good, because I've actually done something wrong here. I read this as, for some reason, I thought plus his presence 0, and for some reason, I thought it was his intelligence here that I had to roll. So I give him a -1, which is why I ended up with this terrible 2. But in fact, as a matter of fact, what I could have done according to this card is NPC attitude, which means I could have added any attitude. I could have had my choice. So having already made a bad roll, I could have sort of said, well, I'll try and make this a bit better by adding his agility for some strange reason. This is why I did this, because that wouldn't make sense. Why would his agility come into play in this? It would have to be, for this kind of role, when you're interrogating, it would have to be his intelligence or his charisma that would be in play here. And I've already used his presence, so it had to be his intelligence. That seemed to be logical to me. I should have noted that in my notes here, but that's why I did that. That is why I did that. But it does actually give you the choice. It just says NPC attitude. Oh no, wait a minute. NPC attitude. I'm really making a balls up of this. The NPC attitude is the attitude of the father. Hurrah! We've got there. And I'll just refer to this sheet. This comes with some of the printouts that you can do. It's like a play sheet, so you can put the cards on. But it does give you kind of like a reminder of some of the key things, about rolling. And here it has NPC attitude. And I'd already explained to you that Jerry comes across as being unfriendly. That's where I got my -1 from. That is how I'd solved this particular roll, and that's why it ended up 2. And if we take it to look at 2, this is under here. You've got a choices. The person changes the subject, or the person refuses to talk. The person adopts an unfriendly attitude towards you and does one of these following. Well, I decided to be all that for some strange reason, which Dan puts down to the fact that they'd had a falling out. Jerry refuses to talk to him, or wants to change the subject, doesn't want to talk about what's happened, and just clamps down. They finish their coffee and their sandwich, and that ends the scene, really. And unfortunately, from my point of view, that turns out to be a failed interrogation, really, and it kind of like shuts down this scene altogether. There's nowhere to go because Jerry just does not want to talk about this, wants to get back into the car and just get Darren home. So, end scene. Now, so at this point now, and I believe that this is how this works, because this scene ended unfavourable to Darren, you then have to add 1 to the time limit, making it 9. Bringing it closer to that 12 you don't want. So this has just made the investigation harder, which makes sense from that point of view of Jerry shutting down like that. But as I say, this is just a scene opener, so it's not all bad. It sounds bad, that you've not learned anything here. Your close family member is not being helpful at all. It's been a short scene. It's just been closed down. I suppose one of the benefits from this scene, and how I could have negated adding that 1, is saying it was balanced out by the fact that he did learn one thing, that there's something very strange going on here because of the anomaly which happened. So I could sort of put it like this. I could sort of say, well, no, he hasn't learned much about the case because of what's happened with Jerry, but something has happened which has triggered his senses towards there being something weird that's going on. Do these cancel each other out? I'm erring on the fact that no, Darren is just going to come into this, see this weird thing, think it was like a deja vu sort of thing, really kind of doubt that he actually saw what he saw, and then not think of it. And anyway, he's going to be thinking about what's just happening with his father. So I'll probably put that anomaly to the back of his mind. It may come into play later on, but at the moment, it's not having an impact on the investigation. So I'll stick with that. I'll go that it's been unfavourable, and we've ticked the time limit up 1 because this was an unfavourable outcome. And okay, so we've done our first scene. Okay, now I know I've meandered. I mean, I'm looking at my clock here, and this has been 50 minutes, me explaining this, or so. You know, it's been quite a long time with me explaining this. But I hope that gives you an idea of how something simple, a simple mechanism like this, where you can just go through it and roll and fill in, literally just fill these things in and be over and done with this quite quickly. How it can develop into something longer and larger, because all the time you're thinking, what does this mean? What impact does this event have on what's happening? And even though this is a scene setter, which not much should really happen in a scene setter like this, all that's happened is Dan has arrived home, basically, and met his father. That's it. Nothing has really happened of any real consequence, apart from the anomaly, which he's kind of like put out his mind anyway. And I've spent all this time explaining to you what's been going on, because there's so many avenues that you can explore with this. I didn't have to do the scene event. I could have moved on to something else. I could have made this quicker, but I decided I want to explore this. I've also started developing a little bit more of the background, which while I was doing this, I started writing in. I wrote a bit about the anomaly here. I wrote some possible backgrounds about what this had happened. For example, I expanded on the fact that he'd had this family fallout because he'd left town, and he's coming back into this town, and it's all strange, this sort of thing. And in fact, I even got to the point where I decided what will happen next, because obviously the next scene that's going to happen is Jerry takes Darren home in the car to meet his mother. And possibly, I haven't even decided yet whether his girlfriend's going to be back there at the home, and that'll be the next scene. So there's that going on. I've also I couldn't help myself. I also started thinking, well, what does the anomaly mean? What could be strange? What is this mist all about? What's happening? What could be creating a mist? What is the mystery of Bear Cave? And where does the sheriff fit into this? But that's a story for another day. And there we go, we've got to the end of this. Sorry it took so long with my sort of bumbling on, but you can see that I'm just excited about this. It's a terrific little game, even though I kind of clearly do not know what I'm doing, because there's bits I got lost in and things I did wrong, but it kind of all worked out, because even when I did the thing wrong with rolling the thing about his father being unfriendly, I walked through that, and I learned why that would happen, and it all worked out all right in the end. So there you go, Little Town. Thoroughly recommend it. I'm not sure whether I'll continue with this particular adventure now, because like I say, I'd already started a separate adventure which I'd done a little bit too much background in, but I got kind of invested in that, and I really want to see where that goes. So it may be interesting that we look at that again, and you can see the comparison of doing a little research and doing a lot of research and what that means. Cheers, thanks for watching.